Good afternoon, Albuquerque. Thank you for joining this telephone town hall with Mayor Tim Keller. For those of you who are wondering if you are connected, you are. Right now, you are in what is called listen-only mode, which means you can hear me, but I cannot hear you. In just a few moments, we will introduce Mayor Keller and other city leaders, and then we will open it for questions. But first, let me go over a few housekeeping items. Today's event is also bilingual and being interpreted in real time into Spanish. If you would like to listen in Spanish, press *0 on your phone. Por favor, presione la estrella y el número 0 para escuchar en español. Spanish speakers are also encouraged to follow @Alcalde Keller on Twitter, see COVID resources in Spanish at cabq.gov, or call 311 and ask for a Spanish speaker for any questions about city services. If you would like to ask a question, you can press *3 on your phone, and you will be put in line to speak with one of our staff members. Again, to ask a question, press *3 on your phone. Our staff will hop on, take down your name and question, and then you will return to the town hall. Then, if you hear your name, you will be live to the entire conference and can ask your question directly to Mayor Keller and city officials. We'll do our best to get as many questions as possible, so please press *3 now if you'd like to ask a question. Along with Mayor Keller, we also have a number of city leaders joining us today who can speak to some of the specific questions folks in Albuquerque have been asking. We have Acting Director of Environmental Health, Mark Demina, Director of Family and Community Services, Carol Pearce, Director of Senior Affairs, Ana Sanchez, Director of Solid Waste Management, Matthew Whalen, Director of Public Affairs, Helen Maestas, Director of the Albuquerque Community Safety Department, Mariela Ruiz Angel, and Chief of Albuquerque Police Department, Harold Medina. Now, I would like to turn the conversation over to Mayor Tim Keller for some initial remarks. Mayor?
Well, good afternoon, Albuquerque, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today. You know, we're going into this new year, and we're also spending a lot of time reflecting on our city's potential, but also understanding we've got a lot of work to do to make our community safer. And as a surprise to, I think, no one at this point, our top priority continues to be crime, as well as working on our challenges with respect to homelessness and housing. I also want to mention, though, that we've got to continue to do everything it takes to run the city, from our buses to the zoo, to trash pickup, to animal welfare. And so we're going to be available for questions on any topics today, as we always are. But certainly we'll spend a little bit of time talking in the beginning about what we're working on with respect to crime. So as a reminder, over the summer, I was able to get together the leaders of the different entities involved in our criminal justice system. So the district attorney, state police, the courts, and the parole board, public defenders, and of course our Albuquerque Police Department, and our legislators. And we all agreed that we were fed up with what's happening with respect to crime in our city. But we also agreed that we have to do more than just talk about the problem and talk about each other's problems. We decided that we would commit to doing what we could in our own shop, our own department, or our own entity to help each other. So we've got to-do items for the police department, for the city, all the way up and down the metro area. And we all committed to about 40 things that we need to do differently to try and change the way criminal justice system works in Albuquerque. But about half of those initiatives require help from our legislators. And so as you may know, The New Mexico legislature is in session. They're in session by a law for 30 days. It's what's called a short session. And they are debating a lot of our crime fighting initiatives right now. And so that's happening right now in Santa Fe, and our team is busy trying to advocate for these efforts that we think will help reduce crime in the metro area. And there's opportunities for folks to help. So if you have questions, we'll take those, of course, but you can look at cabq.gov/MCI, and MCI stands for the Metro Crime Initiative, and that's where we're tracking all of these efforts. And we would love your help to contact our legislators in the area and ask them to support these initiatives. Now, we're also, of course, in the midst of the really third or fourth wave, depending on how you count it, of the pandemic of COVID. And this one, each wave has been very different. This one, as you know, primarily based around the Omicron variant, is sort of high volume, meaning that we have higher COVID numbers than we have ever had, even than last year. We also know, fortunately, for those who are vaccinated and so forth, the symptoms seem to be less severe. But because the volume is so high, as many of you know, our hospitals are absolutely stretched. And it's extremely difficult on our healthcare system right now. So we continue to do what we can to try and contain and deal with the pandemic that is ongoing. So we can certainly take questions on that if folks have those. But as a reminder, in this time frame, we do believe we have to keep the city running. So whether it's our community centers, our libraries, meal delivery, community safety, we kept those going even during the worst parts of the pandemic. And we're going to keep doing that no matter what happens. But we also need to keep our workforce safe. We also need to make sure we're doing what we need to for the public. But that has been the guiding principle for us over the last 2.5 years, and so we'll continue to follow that. Now, on a positive note, I do want to mention that Albuquerque was named the best place to live and work for the film industry for the 4th year in a row, so that's great news. And this, of course, brings a lot of new business and folks to our city and creates a lot of opportunities for our kids to stay here and start their careers right here and build a family right here at home in Albuquerque instead of having to go to Hollywood or Georgia or other places where film used to be number one. And now, wonderfully, for the 4th year in a row, it's Albuquerque once again. So we've got lots of city leaders on hold for folks who have different questions. And so what I'll do is pause. We'll hand it back to Stacy and get to your questions.
Thank you, Mayor. If you would like to ask a question, you can press *3 on your phone and you will be put in line to speak with one of our staff members. Again, please press *3 on your phone to ask a question. Mayor, we're seeing lots of questions coming in about crime and callers concerned about what we can do to make Albuquerque safer. Can you please speak to what's being done to make Albuquerque a safer city?
Yes, and there's a lot of aspects to this because we know it is, number one, a challenge that we've had for about a decade now. And so it's not, unfortunately, it's not new for us, but it continues to be our biggest challenge. And so we have a lot of things that we're working on. I'll share them, but I'm just giving folks kind of advanced warning that there's a lot to this. And it's also because in the post-pandemic America, violent crime is skyrocketing in almost every major city. And it's, even like Omaha's crime is up, 110%. Fresno's crime is up. I mean, you name the city, almost every city with rare exception is having the same type of issues that we're having. But we know it's still our responsibility to do something about it. So that's what we'll talk about. But I do just want to acknowledge how hard this is because of what's happening around our country. So what we're really focusing on came out of this Metro Crime Initiative. And there's basically a few components to this. Number one, we have to fix the revolving door issue in Bernalillo County. And it's basically this challenge that we have where folks are arrested for violent crimes, for using a weapon, for felonies, and then they are back out on the street, and then they commit more crimes. And so this revolving door issue has two parts to it, but we have to do something about that, and that's where we need the legislature's help. And so what we have come up with as a community, a law enforcement community, is basically saying that the defining situation of when someone should be in prison is if you commit a violent act with a weapon, with a gun. If you use a gun and are shooting people, you should be behind bars. And that's all our Metro Crime Initiative is based on. Now, as folks know, I'm not a lawyer, but when you run this through, you want to make sure that we're protecting civil rights and the Constitution and so forth. And that's why we're asking for very modest, appropriate changes to state law to enable flexibility so that judges and prosecutors can ask for this. So again, it's very basic, and it's only for violent crimes with a gun, because we also know our city and America is awash in guns. And after the pandemic, their gun purchases were the highest they ever have been, and now on the secondhand market, these are ending up in our streets as well. And so all these altercations that historically might not have become violent or life-threatening are, because they involve a semi-automatic weapon. So this is, to us, the connection between gun violence and between the revolving door and what we need at the legislature now in terms of bills, like I know Senate Bill 5 is one of them. But there's a list that I think we'll go over in just a minute. I'll hand it over to Helen to speak to. Now, the other part of this is adequately funding our criminal justice system. And for years, for decades, we have starved our courts. They don't have enough paralegals. They don't have enough administrators to process cases. We don't even have enough judges. We've also starved our prosecutors with staff, and even things like ankle bracelets and the monitoring. Right, people get, they get arrested and then they're out on release, but they have an ankle monitor. Well, as we learned in a lot of different cases that have happened right here in Albuquerque, these folks are then out and they commit another crime, and they either cut off their ankle monitor or their ankle monitor isn't even on, because we have not adequately funded what it takes to have ankle monitors that work. This is how sad things have become in our criminal justice system. So what I want to mention is that part of our legislative agenda is to adequately fund the criminal justice system. We have to do that. And for the first time in decades, we actually have the money. Our state has a multi-billion-dollar surplus. And I do not want to see this session end without them putting a meaningful investment to fight crime in the metro area. And they can no longer say there's not enough money. They could in previous years, but this year they can't. And that's why we need your help to advocate up in the legislature right now to help us fight crime. So there's lots more on this, but let me pause, hand it over to Helen Maestas, who handles a lot of this for our office, to kind of touch on some other aspects of this and how people can help.
Thank you, Mayor Keller. So this is the time that Albuquerque's voice really needs to be heard in Santa Fe. And we want to invite people to visit our website, which the mayor shared, cabq.gov/MCI, to sign up to get involved. We are tracking our Metro Crime Initiative crime fighting bills as they work through the legislative session to committees. And those who sign up will receive our legislative alerts and updates as bills are scheduled to be heard. That website again is cabq.gov/MCI. And for example, there are two bills being heard right now as we speak in the House Public Affairs Committee. House Bill 9, for example, is sponsored by Representative Pamela Herndon, and this would make it a crime and impose penalties when minors are allowed access to unlawful access to firearms. Also, HB 96, which is sponsored by Representative Gail Chasey, would create a statewide violence intervention program. Now, this would expand and grow on the violence intervention program that we have implemented here at the City of Albuquerque. So I really want to encourage people, if you want to get involved, if you want to make your voice heard on issues related to crime, now is the time to sign up and to get involved at cabq.gov/MCI. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks so much, Helen. And in the midst of the high-level answers that we've given you, I also want to let you know what APD is specifically working on our streets right now. And so I'll hand it over to Chief Medina to discuss that.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things I want to touch upon is just the hard work that the men and women of the Albuquerque Police Department do day in and day out. These employees, both sworn and civilian, put a lot of effort into making sure that we can clear cases, especially when it comes to violent crime. Right now, our number one priority is the homicides and getting justice for the victims and the victims' families of these horrible crimes. We've been very successful in updating the training, getting the advanced technology, the tools that our officers need to successfully find a resolution to these cases. And over the last 2 weeks, a lot of the hard work from the previous 6 months is starting to show some of the successes that we're hoping that continue. And we've had a number of warrants and arrests related to homicide. But it's not only homicide that we're working on and that we're trying to hit. You know, one of the things a lot of the public sometimes seems to get overshadowed, but people are effective about it. Our number one complaint is some of our traffic problems. And just before I logged on this phone call, I checked the number of citations that were given in the last 28 days, and I'm happy to say that our officers issued over 4,600 traffic citations. And we put a great emphasis on traffic citations as of lately and making sure that individuals are being cited. So, to kind of give an overall aspect of what our crime is looking like, homicides, big priority, auto theft, big priority, traffic enforcement, big priority. And then along the lines of property crime, we know we've done well over the past couple of years. And the biggest thing that we're looking for or that we're trying to accomplish is recruiting. We have to grow the number of officers that we have in the department. We have a number of openings, and we're asking all of the community. If you know somebody who would be a good officer, send them in our direction. They could come over. They could do ride-alongs. We are the best paid police department in the state of New Mexico. They have a great compensation and benefits package. And, I really have to throw that pitch that I'd really love a department that was built from the community and that would understand the community. So, like I said, everybody has somebody in their family that they will make a good officer. It's a great career, and I hope you can send them our way. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Chief Medina, Mayor Keller, and Helen Maestas. If you're on the call and you would like to ask a question to city officials, please press *3 on your phone now. Again, press *3 to ask a question. Next, we have Robert on the line to ask a question about COVID testing. Robert, please go ahead. You're live with Mayor Keller.
You want me to ask him? Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Hello?
Hi, Robert. You can ask your question.
Yeah, my question is, I went to the airport to get a COVID test, and there's signs all over the airport that say if you got symptoms of COVID, please do not come in, blah, 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 and all the other stuff. But I was going to get checked for COVID, and I had to go all the way up to the third floor, walk through practically the whole airport with COVID symptoms to get tested. And that just doesn't seem right to me. Why is that?
Thanks, Robert. That's a really good point, actually. And I know I've gone to that same. It is one of the best places to go if you can go there, just because there's usually not a wait and such. And you're absolutely right in terms of where it's located. So I do know we have our Dr. Mark Demena can probably answer that question best. But I think part of that is it's the opposite problem for the people coming off the plane, right? So we also want to offer it to people right when they get through security, and that's why it's there, so they don't have to walk all the way through the airport. So in other words, if we put it at the other end, we'd have the reverse problem. But, maybe we should have it at both ends. So let me just open that up to our Director of Environmental Health, Mark Demena. Mark?
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the question. I think that is so conspicuous in everything we've dealt with COVID. The more we try to keep each other safe, the more we end up having to take some risks. I think what Mayor said is exactly right. The idea there is that those test setups were originally intended and set up for passengers deplaning so that they could come in and get a test and know if they needed to immediately go to a quarantine hotel or someplace like that when they got here. But I think what you described is an experience that everybody is having right now. It is very difficult to get a COVID test anywhere. So the fact that you're having to go essentially backwards through the process to the highest level of the airport to get that, because that's where a test is available, I think speaks to that a lot. I'm appreciative that you recognize that you might be symptomatic. We know there is a lot of that going on where people are going out to try to get the test. They're trying to get the home test at a Walgreens or a CVS, something like that. And they're probably having to risk exposing others while they get the test. It's better when we can get people through things like drive-throughs or like clinic-type testing, but those are very, very booked right now. And that is just, that very much speaks to how intense the transmission is right now. As Mayor referenced earlier in the call, we have just ridiculously high new case loads, very, very high numbers of tests being done, and the entire system is kind of saturated. So that does kind of speak to the larger problem that it's very difficult to get a test right now. You need to call ahead or try to find someplace to get testing. You can check the website as well. It's CV, that's Charlie Victor, .nmhealth.org. Again, cv.nmhealth.org to look for testing resources that might be more accessible, someplace where you can drive up, someplace where you know there's going to be a test available when you get there. But a lot of those sites, people aren't able to get a test when they get to the site in the first place. The home tests are often sold out as soon as they hit shelves. So as not ideal as it is, if you believe that you have COVID and you can't get access to a test, the best thing to do is just to stay home while you're sick and avoid exposing others. We know Omicron is less severe for many people, but for unvaccinated people or vulnerable people, it's still very much a high risk. So take the most protective stance, and I think again it highlights that there's always room for us to improve with the testing, and I think we definitely need to look at that and making it more accessible. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Mark. And I also would add some easy to access hope in this testing situation is that we finally got the state tests now being available. So there are 80,000 free tests available, and that really just started, I think, yesterday. So maybe or a couple of days ago. And to find the locations where you can pick those up, if you just type in CABQ emergency management in Google and click it, you should then see a map of where you can pick up these free at-home tests. So again, 80,000 free at-home tests are available now that family members or yourselves can just go pick up. And I know, like the amount of times I have driven to a gazillion different Walgreens and Walmarts looking for tests, and they're out and so forth. I do just want to encourage people, if you do have access to the internet, I know not everyone does, but if you do, start there before you get in your car, because it's super frustrating. But I have found now a lot of these places will at least tell you, yeah, there's one place out on the west side that has 10 left, but in the meantime, take advantage of the free ones. 80,000 available now for distribution.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Director. Robert, great question. We're all thinking about how to keep each other safe, and COVID testing is a big piece of that. If you would like to ask a question to Mayor Keller and city officials, please press *3 on your phone. Our next question comes from Andre, who has a question about child care. Andre, please go ahead. You're live on the call.
Hello, everyone. Okay, so I would like to know what the city is doing about opening spots in the community centers and the after-school program to help parents very hard. I'm struggling to get my kids picked up after school because there's just not enough spots in the after school program. I'd like to know what the city is doing about making more spots available.
Thanks so much for that question, Andre, and I think we might have some ways we can help. As a reminder, our city, one of the things that we emphasized even before the pandemic was the availability and slots of after school and summer programs for our kids. And so we've increased that in general by about 30%, which is great. But more specifically to your question, and we see this, look, my kids are in APS, and, you know, it's like, oh my gosh, our school is closed for 3 days. What do we do? You know, because my wife also works. And so the short answer is there is availability. And our school programs are also available on, you know, you have to kind of register for a period of time, like a month, but it only costs, the cost is minimal. It's like $5. And you don't have to use it every day. The key is to map out which centers have available spots. So what you want to do, and again, these are for children over, I think it's 5 or 6 and up, but all that information will be on the website. And of course, the website is CABQ/family/CREI/youth programs, but just type in CABQ youth programs and hit Google, and it'll come up. And basically, but what you got to do is, the challenge is, like, it'll tell you the community center nearest you, and some community centers are full. That's probably what you're experiencing. All you have to do is look at another one nearby, and it will probably be open. I do know we have open community centers, and so this is why, you know, even with my kids, sometimes, like, I have to, it's not always the most convenient because I have to take them to a center that's not super close, but at least there's availability, which I'm grateful for. So that's really how you can do it. There are availability in the system. It just might not be the one closest to your house. And so in the short term, try and utilize where there are slots available, and that you should be able to see all that through that website. Now, 2 other aspects to this that I want to mention. We are suffering from a staffing shortage, like pretty much all of America, in terms of the staff that we could use to then open up more slots. And so we're hiring. I just want everyone to know, if you or anyone you know is interested in working at the city, just go to CABQ, type it in, CABQ jobs, and you will see we have hiring bonuses available. We have, you know, great work-life, work-from-home arrangements, all of these things that are best in class, at least in terms of government jobs. And one of them that we do need is folks to man our youth and summer programs. So the faster we can hire, the more slots we can open. And wonderfully, we have the funding for it. So again, funding is not the issue. We just need more folks to sign up to help out the city that we love. The last thing I would mention is, if your kids are younger than that, right? So if they're 5 or 6 and younger, then the city does operate early childhood centers where you can get very, relatively speaking, cheap, economical childcare for your kids and Head Start programs. So that is available. Same thing, just look up CABQ Early Childhood, and all that information is online. And similarly, they might be full in certain areas of town, but I do know there is extra room in the system as a whole. So there should be somewhere where you can take your child. So if you have further questions on that, what I would do is just give 311 a call, or stop by the nearest community center, and just in person you can ask about it and say, hey, how does this work? How can you help me? And the person at the community center can tell you. Lastly, you know, we have roughly 20 or so community centers. So just as a reminder to folks, there is a community center near you. Just call 311 if you don't know where it is. But one of the things our city is blessed with is a good array of community centers throughout every neighborhood in the city. All right, and then lastly, we are hiring teenagers. So you can solve 2 problems at once: our labor shortage, and also what can your teens do during the summer and sometimes after school. And so we, every year in the spring, right around, it'll be in end of February or March, we have our youth fair, our hiring fair, And so stay tuned for dates and locations on when that's going to be. But we hire thousands of teenagers to essentially, provide daycare and summer programs for middle schoolers and elementary schoolers. I was in that program when I was a kid, and it's an awesome thing. And so we really need teenagers coming up soon. And that fair is going to happen February 26th. And just Google CABQ Youth Fair, and you can get all the information on that.
Thank you, Mayor Keller. And just to repeat for our listeners and for those listening in Spanish, to register for our youth programs, please visit yc.cabq.gov, yc.cabq.gov. And for those with older children, teenagers, and early 20s, you can visit cabq.gov/job fair for information on youth employment. As a reminder, if you would like to ask a question, please press *3 on your phone. Our next question comes from Jay with some questions about COVID safety. Go ahead, Jay. You're live with Mayor Keller.
Oh, I was actually asking about when the free N95 mask will be available, and also will they be available in all the pharmacies, is what I was reading.
Okay, thanks so much for your question. I know, earlier we spoke about the test kits, but why don't we reiterate for masks and any other supplies, and also again for test kits, kind of where those are available and how to get them. And I think Dr. Mark Domena might be able to be the most specific on that. Mark, you want to take this one?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the question. So I think the N95 program from the federal government, I don't think has rolled out yet. They're currently rolling out the tests. And that's covidtest.gov that you can go to, again, covidtest.gov, to get the home test that can be sent to you. That's actually a great way to get a hold of tests right now. It takes about a week or so from the time you ask for them till they'll arrive in the mail, and that's 4 of the rapid antigen tests that you can do at home. The N95s, I think those are coming out on the heels of that, but I don't know the specific dates associated with that. My understanding also is, yes, they'll be available in pharmacies and places like that, and I think you can have them sent as well. But in the meantime, there are lots of other mask options that are available, and now that we've kind of caught up on some of the backlog, they can be gotten almost any pharmacy. Surgical masks are great if you can get them, KN95s or N95s, and if for whatever other reason you're just not able to get to one of those places, you can still get a lot of those that are very very functional, even from websites. Amazon or any prefer to shop can send that stuff out as well. Most of the pharmacies have at least some alternative for masks available in the meantime as well.
Thank you, Director. If you'd like to ask a question, please press *3 on your phone, and we'll continue to take your calls. Our next question comes from Betty with a question about crime and safety. Betty, go ahead. You're live with Mayor Keller.
Okay. As far as crime and safety, they have to really put down the law with the guns and all of these crimes that are going on, especially in schools. I have grandkids and great-grandkids that go to school, and, it's got to really put down the law because these kids are getting hurt. And not just the kids, everybody else that owns, restaurants or any place anybody works. I mean, they really got to put down that law about guns.
Thank you, Betty, and I couldn't agree more, and I appreciate a good reminder, too, about even the guns in schools. There is some legislation that is going through the roundhouse about accountability with respect to, not having children have access to weapons. And so just want to reiterate, the best thing for the next, there's probably 20 days left, that everyone in Albuquerque can do to fight crime is call your legislator. Call your legislator and tell them exactly what you just told all of us. They need to hear from Albuquerque that they need to take action. So, Helen, why don't you remind everyone how they can contact their legislator?
Thank you, Mayor. So again, if you would visit cabq.gov/MCI, that's cabq.gov/MCI, to sign up today to get involved. We will be forwarding or sending out legislative alerts to let you know when our crime-fighting bills are sent to a committee, what committee it's being sent to, and which legislators you should be reaching out to in the House and Senate. And so we will be doing that throughout the legislative session. We are tracking our bills, and we ask you to please make Albuquerque's voice heard by contacting your legislators. That can mean sending an email, making a phone call, or reaching out to your own respective House or Senate leader who represents your area. And to the issue of youth access to firearms, that bill is House Bill 9, and it is being heard this very afternoon by the House Public Affairs Committee. It's sponsored by Representative Pamela Herndon, and it would make it a crime and impose penalties to allow unlawful access to a firearm by a minor. So please sign up with us today to get our alerts. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And also as a reminder for folks, I know, local government can be fairly confusing sometimes, and people might remember I used to be a state senator, so I just want to let folks know, if you don't know who your state House representative is and who your state senator is, it's very easy to find. Just go to nmlegis.gov, and again, that you elect them. They literally represent you, so call them and tell them what you want them to do. And I'm obviously saying that we want them to help us fight crime. And so you can also just, they're very accessible. I know, people would call me all the time when I was their state senator, and I wanted to hear from them. I wanted to hear from my neighbors. And so, again, at least for the next 20 days, that's where I think our city's focus should be.
Thank you, Mayor and Director, for those reminders for how folks can get involved and help make a difference in making Albuquerque safer. For those of you on the call that would like to ask a question to Mayor and our city officials, please press *3 on your phone. Our next question comes from Crystal, who has a question about homelessness. Crystal, go ahead. Crystal, you're live with Mayor Keller. You can ask your question.
Yes, so I have a concern with the homelessness in the area. Basically, it's everywhere, but I run a property at the intersections of Carlisle and Boulevard, and I know that the homelessness is very bad over here. We deal with them daily, and I'm just wondering what's being done to control this or get it under control. For residents and other people that live in the area.
Thank you, Crystal, and I'm glad you asked about that because, right after a crime, homelessness that is our second priority, and we have a number of things we can share with you. So I think what I'd like to do is we have some of our city leaders who can speak to this, but at a very high level, let me just share with you a couple of notes. One is that people may know that we have invested, the voters approved it 2 years ago, and we bought the old Loveless Hospital on Gibson, and we are in the process of turning it into a support center where homeless can go and people can be taken to get off the streets. And that's keeping things really simple in simple terms. There's a lot to that, but I want you to know that we have made that investment. And now it's a matter of getting a council approval and getting some rehab done, but that will be a game changer for our city and for those individuals to get them help. So first and foremost, we're kind of on second base, if you will, on that, and we expect to get to home plate somewhere around the end of this year. And so that's going to make a big difference on this issue in a number of areas. But in the meantime, we're doing some other things too. So why don't I tee up Mariella to talk about her department. Also, Carol, you can touch on the work that you guys are doing. And also our encampment response is run by a gentleman, Matthew Whalen, who can talk about specifically, if there are situations of like individuals behind your business that are using drugs, what do you do? Well, we have answers for that now. And before I hand it over to them, I just want to acknowledge that the city developed a new encampment policy after we lost in court. There was a court decision that threw out a lot of city ordinances last October. So that was only, it was like 3 months ago. But after that, we came up with a policy that is legal and constitutional and compassionate, but also enforceable. And so that is now what we have, and that's important because I think for the first time in a long time, there's a lot of things we can do to help. And over the last summer, we really struggled with that. So to outline what we can do, let's just start maybe with Mariella. Why don't you talk about your new department?
Thank you, Mayor Keller. Hi, everybody. My name is Mariella Ruiz-Anjo. I'm the director of our newest department, the Community Safety Department. It's a third branch of public safety. So when you call 911 or 311, instead of maybe getting a police officer for crime or a firefighter for medical or fire needs, you'll get a behavioral or mental health responder to be able to go help out in some of these situations that don't require a badge or a gun. It's really about creating the right response at the right time. So to answer the question around some of our homelessness, which is our number one call, we've been out to over 3,000 calls since September 1st, and our number one call is around unsheltered individuals. And so a big piece of what ACS does is to go out, assess the situation, and really try to figure out if that individual would benefit from a resource like a nonprofit, if they can actually be right, if they're having underlying issues like schizophrenia or something else that they need support in different ways, we make sure that we can get them to those services. Now, as many of you know, sometimes they don't want that, and I think that's a piece of what we're really trying to figure out. And I'm teeing up family and community, and so our big job really is to try to get folks to get to those resources. However, we understand that sometimes it's really difficult for businesses. So we have been getting quite a bit of calls from businesses in the mornings, especially, or late in the evenings. You can put in requests at 311. And ask for ACS to go out. We will go and address the situation and make sure that we can get those individuals to a different location and also be able to get them those resources.
Thank you so much, Mariella. And if, Matt, whatever you think is helpful to add, maybe just chime in at this point, and then we'll hand it over to Carol.
Perfect. So as Mayor Keller was saying, we're taking a multi-department approach when it comes to addressing those experiencing homelessness. And just like Mariella's department, our department comes in on some of the tail end of some of these situations. But what I would say is if you do have an issue where there is an encampment near your business or you see an encampment, the easiest thing to do is to call 311. If it's not an immediate emergency where you have to dial 911, just call 311 and you can report it. And we also have some responders that can go out and assess the situation and offer resources and then contact Mariella's group if they feel they need to go out, or they can offer some resources themselves. And they'll assess the encampment, and based on the assessment of the encampment, we follow the city's new encampment policy, and then we can get it removed. We meet with those individuals, we inform them of what they need to do, we get them out of the area, and then we will go right in after and clean up anything that's left after that. So I would just encourage you to use our 311 system so that we can address these situations properly and timely.
Thanks. And our Director of Housing and Homelessness and all sorts of other departments as well, Carol Pearce.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Carol Pearce. I'm the Director of Family and Community Services, and that does include our community centers that we talked about earlier, providing youth programming, child development, our health and social service centers, and our housing and homeless services. So I really think that the other directors answered what happens when there is an unhoused individual on our streets. But what also is available through the city are shelter resources. So on our website at cabq.gov/homeless, there are a variety of resources, and one includes the bus schedule and transportation to get to our West Side Emergency Housing Center. So that is a place where men and women can receive 3 meals a day and to get support and be off the streets. We do have room there now, and we have approximately 300 to 325 people there. We also are, during this COVID time, we operate a COVID hotel. We are really proud how we've minimized the impact of COVID in our shelters, but if somebody does have COVID, we have a special COVID place, a COVID hotel, where we have medical personnel that are helping them navigate the healing process through COVID. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we also operate a hotel where families can go. And this is available, and our partners, like the other directors as well as the outreach providers in the community, can give people access. So for the community member that asked the question, what's available, there are many things available to get people connected to other resources to get them off the street. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And the one other thing that I would just share, like to your question, we do clean hundreds of encampments every week in the city. The challenge, of course, is that there are more than that out there, and so hence the need for the work on the front end to prevent homelessness and to also make sure that when we do work with folks, that they actually are able to stay off the streets and not just go right back on. So it's very difficult, but I just want to acknowledge that we do work on that. There's obviously specific areas like Coronado Park that have different dynamics because of the shuttle drop-off and so forth. But in general, we are proactive on encampments. It's just right now, obviously, a huge problem that we're working on, but it's one that we're not going to give up on. The last thing I would just say is a reminder to folks, sometimes if you see encampments on the highways and things like this, those can be very dangerous for, obviously, the individuals who are camping, and also for those driving on the roads and things like this. The state is responsible for those, but definitely call those in, because we tell the state that they need to do that, because we don't want to see anyone actually hurt no matter what. And so similarly, so when you do see those situations, particularly around traffic and so forth, just please call them in, and you'll notice we do take action, and so does the state on those. The ones that are kind of hidden away and so forth are a little bit of a different issue, but I just want to let folks know that we are actively working on it, but there's a long way to go, and a huge part of it is having somewhere where people can actually get help, and that's what is behind our efforts at the Gateway Center, which is roughly what we call the old Loveless Hospital out on Gibson. Okay, Stacy, we'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Mayor. And we know that homelessness is an issue in our city, and I'm heartened that so many of our leaders and departments are collaborating to help get people housing and keep each other safe. Our next question comes from Marion. Marion, you're live with Mayor Keller. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Good afternoon, Mayor Keller. Thank you for helping us. I just want to ask, what are you going to do for the victims of domestic violence? Because you said crime has gone up, and we know that's all over the country. So we've been trying to open a new shelter for 5 years, and we're not going to stop. How can you help us? And we probably need about 10 of them here in Albuquerque. Thank you.
Thanks for that question, and you're so right about the need. So I think I would offer two helpful things, hopefully. One is, we're very supportive. I think the county was looking at purchasing, I'm sure you're aware of this, the facility out on the west side, and running it and operating it for domestic violence. And so we're very supportive of that idea. I do know the county was taking the lead on that, so you could check in with them specifically on that project, and we're there to support it in whatever way the county, would ask. The second thing is, one of the things that we were able to do last year, which I'm so grateful for, is hire a domestic violence efforts coordinator. So if you haven't met Haley McCormick from our team, it's the first time the city of Albuquerque's ever had someone in Haley's role, but she is the one to connect to specifically. So if you don't know her, you could just Google, CABQ Haley McCormick, and her contact info should show up, or just call 311 and they can transfer you over to her. But I would talk to her about what else that we're working on. And of course, we have reinvigorated the Family Advocacy Center, known as the FAC, meaning that they have much better staffing than they had 2 years ago. And even I think it's Beverly McMillan is back there. So I think the city is back proactively helping. I'm sure there's more we could do, but I would just put you in touch with Haley, and we can take it from there. And also would mention we had a task force, which you may be aware of, on domestic violence. And one of the takeaways was to hire someone full-time to do this work, and that's why we hired Haley. So let's give her a shot and take it from there.
Thank you, Mayor. Our next question comes from Dottie, who has a question about senior services and the elderly. Dottie, you're live. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. As an elderly person in Albuquerque, I'm wondering what the city is willing to do to help us. My husband is handicapped and blind, and we get notices regularly that it's our responsibility to clean an alley that runs along our property line. Now, we have the homeless, we have the druggies, everything there. People are afraid to come to my house because of the problems over here. And actually, we haven't seen you do anything to really solve our problem. And we call the police, and they take 3 hours to get here. By the time they're here, the person is already far gone. So we really need a little more immediate action from the police department. Unless there are gunshots and people are bleeding, we don't get an officer. And every time we get an officer, the officers are wonderful, but their hands are tied. They can't really do anything about the problem. And half the time, before the person even gets downtown, they're already sprung. I mean, they're already back out on the street. Now, we really, really, in this neighborhood especially, need police protection. My husband, like I said, is in his 80s, and he's handicapped. He can't go out and clean the alley of biohazards because they use our alley for a toilet. And it's very, very frustrating, Mayor, to call the police, call your office, call 311, and then have somebody come out and tell us we're responsible for cleaning the stuff up that they do in our alley. So I want to know.
Okay, thank you for that question. And I think we have some clear answers, so I just want to reiterate that we're handling this differently than we did before. You touched on a number of issues, so I'm going to try and kind of parse that out. Let's just start with cleaning up in alleys. In general, I mean, alleys have always been the responsibility of property owners. I'm not saying that you should be doing that in any way, but I just want you to know that's not a new policy. That's just how our city has always handled alleys. But in your situation, our solid waste department will clean up your alley. I think the issue is when you call it in to 311, ask for solid waste to clean up your alley. And as a separate issue, we'll talk about why obviously that person was back there and so forth. But I just want you to know that we have a team that does this, and they do it all over the city. So I know we can deliver on cleaning up your alley when it is particularly in a bad situation. And so that I would separate that from the individual issue, right? Because that's going to be, folks with a trash truck, and they're going to clean up your alley. They will do that, and they do that with graffiti. We do this in lots of parts of town, and they do it usually, within a day or two. They're very prompt and very good at what they do. So I would just log in that request, make that call as a standalone thing. Just call and request it, and they'll get it taken care of. Now, with respect to the individual and the situation you're describing, the police are taking a long time to get there just because they are strapped for other calls. So I just want to acknowledge that I wish, and they wish, that we could promptly respond to every single call within minutes. But they're having to prioritize violent crimes. And so they are working hard. And we're, as the chief mentioned, trying to support them by getting as many officers as we can. And, we're hiring. We have $10,000 bonuses. We're doing what we can on that front. And we also have an answer in the meantime, because you don't really need a police officer. What you need is our new department. And that's, again, I want to emphasize new. This department did not exist in operation a couple of months ago. Now, in this situation, we would send our community safety department. And Mariella, I'll tee you up in just a minute, just to remind everyone what you do and how it works and how people can request it. And that's important, because that way our officers are freed up to fight crime. And we can get these people out of your alley and also get them some help. And so that way we're not just taking them downtown and they go right back out because they haven't done anything particularly, that's a felony. So anyway, it's just a better way to deal with the situation. And I think now at least we have that. So before I hand it over to Mariella, though, I do want to mention, you said our officers' hands are tied. Everyone who feels that way needs to call your state legislator, because there is a bill that is being voted on tomorrow afternoon that would help untie our officers' hands. And I need Albuquerque to help me advocate at the state legislature to help our police department. And so we all have the opportunity to make a difference and support our police department for the next 20 days. And so I need your help to do that. You can keep calling my office and everything else after the 20 days. But for 20 days, please call your state legislator. Mariella, do you just want to kind of remind folks again about your department and how it would be a faster response in this situation and in many ways a better response?
Yes, of course. So just to kind of remind everybody, this third branch to public safety is really about helping out police and fire, right? Right now they are completely overtaxed. So some of these low acuity calls, right, they don't require a gun, they don't require a badge, they don't require an officer's time. It really requires two folks who can go out, talk to an individual and say, okay, we can't have you sleeping in this alleyway, especially if it's trespassing, or especially if it's in a situation where it could be harmful to them or to the people around them. So we will go out and have those conversations. And for the most part, most folks move. They will go along, and sometimes even better, we'll get them to the right services so that they can get into, right, whatever kind of services they might need. Sometimes it's addiction services. Sometimes it's just housing. Now, I do want to also say for those on the call that we don't just go out to homeless calls around homelessness. We go out to a variety of calls. So anything that falls into the realm of behavioral mental health, right? So for seniors who have been on the call, sometimes we know that there's issues around, right, people taking care of their parents or them taking care of their elderly children still. And, a lot of that, sometimes there's disputes at home. And we're willing to go out to those calls, mediate, figure out a long-term solution for some of these individuals who are struggling. Again, somebody doesn't need to be arrested. They're not violent. ACS is a really good opportunity for us to work not just with the individual in crisis, but the families that are having to, right, be a part of that trauma. And additionally, even the community, right? One of our positions that we just started, we're very proud of, is our community-oriented response and assistance responder. And this is an individual who, as many of you have seen, there's been high rates of homicides that we've really been, right? It doesn't just impact the individuals, it impacts the entire community. And so this CORA responder is somebody who goes out and works with the community and works with the schools and works with the families who are impacted by some of these violent and traumatic crimes. So we're very involved in community. You can visit us at cabq.gov/ACS. Again, that's cabq.gov/ACS, or you can call 311 for more information. And if it's an emergency, if it's something that cannot wait, please call 911 always. And at some point, they will qualify if it is a police response or an ACS response that needed. And maybe it's both. Maybe you'll get the officer and you'll also get the ACS responder. This is, again, the right response at the right time for the right call. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Director. We have time for one last question on today's town hall, so we will give the phone over to Vince, who has a question about shoplifting. Vince, please go ahead. You are live on the call.
Hello, Mayor. I would like to know how the city is handling the epidemic of shoplifting right now. It is really bad all over the city. I see it constantly. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that question, and I'll hand it over to the chief to specifically address this. But I just want to acknowledge it is another, post-COVID, speeding is another one, but we no one asked about that, so I won't mention that. But the other one is shoplifting. So we are seeing this, this sort of. It's all. I do the shopping in our family, and I see it all the time. It's terrible. So here's what we're doing about it. The issue is, number one, these big box stores especially they have, because of their corporate risk policy, which I know is a mouthful, they're refusing to work with us to detain or to say anything to people who shoplift. And this is, again, happening all over America, and they're basically saying, because they don't want to get sued or whatever, that they won't help. And so they're putting all of that burden, and they're basically saying, well, we want a police officer in every store. Well, for obvious reasons. We have never had a police officer in every retail store. So we are in a difficult situation here. And I'm talking to their regional representatives and things on how to do this. And when I talk to mayors all around the country, this is like a huge national issue with big box stores and with police departments. And we need a shared responsibility. That's the answer. And right now, there hasn't been much sharing on their end. But here's what we're doing on our end. We're trying to look at this because these are serial, people do this over and over. And that means we can treat it like organized crime, and that means we can have real penalties instead of citations and slaps on the wrist and so forth. So that is our path forward, and I'll let the chief talk about that further. It's a partnership with the Attorney General that the Attorney General and I set up. Go ahead, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. This is Chief Medina. And just to give you an update, there are several things we're doing to address shoplifting. And the first one is that we're working with the Attorney General to identify. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Chief.
Okay. We're working to identify some of our groups that are out there committing shoplifting and prosecuting them as a group, as organized crime. And we mentioned this partnership a few months ago, actually, in the media. We started working with the big box stores that want to work with us and that are willing to work with us. And from there, it springboarded into these companies working more specific operations with us, and we're able to make big progress for the first time. We had several shopliftings that were becoming violent, and the individuals would actually brandish a firearm. And as you know, there is legislation that we are supporting right now, and that we hope Santa Fe passes, that makes that an enhanced crime that you brandish a firearm during a shoplifting. So what we were able to get the district attorney's office to do was they now started to process these shopliftings with somebody brandishing a weapon as a robbery. And that had a big effect on us, on our ability to stop the revolving door, because it's now being charged as a robbery. It's a violent crime, and we're more likely to keep this person detained pre-trial rather than being released back into the community to continue their crime wave. So we continue to work with the big box stores that want to work with us. We actually have a group called the RAPA. It's all the big box stores. They meet with our detectives once a month. They discuss what the trends are. They share information and who the suspects are, and they help identify suspects, and we build our cases off of that. So we will be continued in our commitment to slowing down and working with those places that want to work with us. But like I said, there is some good legislation up in Santa Fe right now that could help us with shoplifting, and enhancing those penalties to be armed with a firearm will only assist us more and safeguard some of the security that are working in the stores and that are being threatened when they leave the stores. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Medina, and thank you to all of our city leaders for being on the call today. Now I will turn it over to Mayor Keller to share some closing remarks. Mayor?
Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and also for the excellent questions. And I think they certainly reflect, the challenges that we're facing as a city. And I want to reiterate that I think we've been able to provide some ways forward. And if folks were unable to kind of catch, whatever website or whatever it was, we will post all of this on our social media platforms and so forth, so you can follow up. And you can always call 311. And they, we track their response rate and turnaround time and things like this. And by and large, the vast majority of the issues that come into 311, at least we can provide you with a path forward or an answer. I would also just reiterate, again, because we are in legislative session, Albuquerque needs help. We cannot deal with these issues by ourselves. They're too big, and we need help from our state legislators. So if you are frustrated, if you're concerned about any issue for the next 20 days, please contact your state legislator and ask them for them to help the Duke City. That's what we need them to do up in Santa Fe. And then we'll continue doing all that we need to do in the meantime and after that. But for right now, we have the opportunity to get some assistance, and that's what we need. So I hope you'll join me in reaching out to our legislators. All right, thank you so much, everybody, and enjoy this warm winter weather we're having right now. Take care.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to everyone who participated in today's bilingual telephone town hall. For information about everything that's going on in the city, whether you're looking for COVID and flu shots that are free of charge, information on crime, or any of the topics we covered today, please visit cabq.gov or call 311. If you'd like to leave a message from the mayor or we didn't get to your question, please remain on the line and you can leave a voicemail in just a moment. This concludes the telephone town hall. Thank you.